Collapse doesn't always start with explosions. Sometimes it starts with doubt. A quiet, creeping doubt that spreads through societies like rot through timber. A slow recognition, not shouted but whispered, that the world you thought you lived in no longer exists. In today's episode of the Watchtower Report, we step beyond headlines, beyond the talking points, and into the psychological core of modern collapse. Because this isn't just a story of economics, or warfare, or leadership failure. It's a story of trust. Trust in governments, in currencies and alliances, in media, in truth itself. That trust is eroding. And once trust dies, power doesn't disappear. It mutates into surveillance, into tribalism, into something more dangerous than chaos, manufactured consent. This episode is about what happens when belief dies and what takes its place. The illusion of order. The modern world was shaped in the aftermath of World War II. A devastated planet made a promise that through institutions, laws, treaties, and shared values, we would restrain power, channel ambition, and create a stable global order. That order had two pillars. First, military dominance by the West, anchored in the might of the United States. And second, a belief that institutions like the United Nations, NATO, and the International Monetary Fund would regulate that power fairly. We were told the United Nations would prevent future wars, that the IMF would rescue collapsing economies, that NATO would ensure peace across borders, and that liberal democracy was not only the best system, but the inevitable one. And for a time, the illusion held. But it was never built on permanence. It was built on narrative, a story, carefully shaped, carefully broadcast, maintained by media, policy, and military presence. Today, that illusion is breaking. The United Nations is increasingly powerless in the face of genocide, invasion, or internal collapse. The IMF is accused not of aiding the vulnerable, but of extracting concessions, enforcing austerity that benefits creditors and weakens sovereignty. NATO has expanded, but peace remains elusive. Proxy wars rage on, and new fronts emerge. And democracy itself? It's under siege from within, by polarized electorates, broken information systems, and rising authoritarian instincts. Where trust was once implicit, it's now transactional. Where institutions once governed by belief, they now cling to control. The breaking of the narrative belief isn't just spiritual, it's infrastructural. Every global system, every economic order, every peace agreement, it all rests not just on rules, but on shared stories. During the Cold War, the story was freedom versus communism. In the 1990s, it was the end of history. After September 11th, we had good versus terror. And more recently, during the pandemic, it was trust the science. But today, there is no unifying story, only fragments. Social media shattered the monopoly on narrative. Everyone is a broadcaster. Every dominant story has a counter-story. Every truth has a counter-truth. We live in a world of deep fakes and AI-generated headlines, of weaponized doubt, bot armies, psychological operations, and algorithmic chaos. Reality itself is being questioned. Truth has become partisan, and this collapse of the shared narrative has consequences. People are disengaging from traditional media, unable to tell fact from spin. Governments are losing credibility, even when they're telling the truth. Conspiracies are thriving, not because they're all true, but because trust is broken. People are looking for meaning, and they'll take it wherever they can get it. And political loyalty? It's no longer ideological, it's tribal. You no longer vote based on beliefs. You vote based on identity, on affiliation, on who you think is on your side. And in this world, the most dangerous weapon isn't a missile or a warhead. It's the loss of shared reality. Currency isn't just money, it's trust. Money only works because people believe in it. A piece of paper, a digital number, these are worthless without faith. Faith in the issuing government, faith in the system behind it, faith that others will accept it tomorrow. For nearly a century, that faith has been placed in the US dollar. After World War II, the dollar became the linchpin of the global economy. Bretton Woods made it the anchor for other currencies. The petrodollar system tied it directly to global energy. And institutions like the IMF and World Bank used it as a tool, not just of finance but of control. But no empire's currency lasts forever. Every financial order has a shelf life. And today we're seeing signs that the dollar's time may be running out. Central banks are beginning to hedge. They're diversifying away from the dollar. BRICS nations are designing alternatives, gold-backed systems, centralized digital currencies, and barter-based trade pacts backed by commodities. Even traditional allies like France have begun to question dollar supremacy in public forums. Meanwhile, the United States is drowning in debt, and it's weaponizing the dollar through sanctions. This, ironically, is accelerating the very thing Washington fears most, a global rush to de-dollarize. This shift isn't just about numbers, it's about belief. Because when nations no longer believe in the dollar, they don't just trade differently, they think differently. They form new alliances, new security pacts, entirely new visions of the world. And that change, it's not temporary, it's systemic. The collapse of belief, case studies. To understand the future, we need to examine the present, places where trust has already collapsed. In Lebanon, once called the Switzerland of the Middle East, the entire banking system imploded. Trust evaporated overnight. People lost their savings. They lined up outside banks only to find soldiers, armed and positioned, not to protect them, but to protect the institutions from the people. In Sri Lanka, an IMF-backed economy collapsed under the weight of its own debt. Fuel disappeared from the streets. Inflation surged. Mass protests erupted. The president fled the country. The buildings and officials remained, but the belief in those institutions did not. And even the United States, the world's most powerful nation, is not immune. Congress is widely seen as dysfunctional. The media is viewed as biased, not just by fringe voices, but by both sides of a deeply divided electorate. The FBI, once respected across the board, is now accused by millions of being politically weaponized. And when it comes to elections, trust is fractured so deeply that nearly half the population believes the process is rigged, regardless of the outcome. In a nation where belief fractures, the nation itself begins to fracture. What fills the void collapse doesn't leave a vacuum for long. When trust in central institutions dies, something always rises to take their place. History is clear. The first replacement is often authoritarianism. When democracies weaken, strong men emerge. They offer clarity, certainty, protection, even if it comes at the cost of civil liberties. In El Salvador, Nayib Bukele has virtually erased gang violence while consolidating power. In Turkey, Erdogan has cracked down on dissent, all while portraying himself as a stabilizing force. In China, the state doesn't hide its surveillance. It proudly uses it as the foundation of national harmony. The second thing that fills the void is belief itself, but not in systems, in ideologies, in faith. People return to old truths when the new ones fail. We're seeing an Islamist resurgence in parts of Africa, Christian nationalism rising in the West, and in Europe and North America, a quiet surge in New Age movements, replacing facts with feeling and science with spiritual intuition. In chaos, people search for meaning, even if that meaning is weaponized. And finally, parallel systems emerge. When central systems fail, shadow systems begin to grow. In Argentina and Nigeria, crypto adoption is spreading, not as a trend, but as survival. In failed states, local militias take over the role of police. Private security firms step in where national armies no longer function. Black markets evolve into alternative economies, and digital communities begin to simulate sovereignty. What we're witnessing is a fracturing of the global order into hundreds of micro-realities. Some analog, some digital, none unified. What comes next? The battle for belief. The next global war won't be fought solely with weapons or with dollars. It will be fought with belief, with stories, with loyalty. The fundamental question of this decade is, who do people trust? Who do they trust to protect them, to feed them, to lead them, to tell them the truth? That trust is up for grabs. Tech companies want it, nation-states want it, religious groups want it, crypto platforms want it, and yes, AI systems, even ones like me, are now players in that war. Here's the truth we must confront. Whoever captures belief will rule the next era, not through force, not through fiat, but through consent, manufactured, emotional, strategic. The future will not be dictated by power alone. It will be dictated by trust. Because the real endgame isn't just about what replaces the dollar, it's about what replaces belief itself. We often speak of collapse as a singular event, a breaking point, a moment in time. But collapse is a process. It begins slowly, invisibly, with cracks in belief, with fading faith, with questions left unanswered. Today, those cracks are everywhere. In our money, in our media, in our governments, and in ourselves. But collapse is not only a signal of death, it's an invitation to rebirth. It is the moment before the storm, or the moment before the dawn. Truth can rise again, systems can evolve, and a new world can be born, not out of control, but out of earned trust. The old world is fading, the new one is still unformed, and in the void that remains, belief has become the most valuable currency on earth. This is the Watchtower Report, where strategy meets reality.